All right, chapter four, the modern philosophies. We're going to start with pragmatism. Pragmatism is kind of what you guys think it is. It's the idea that the result of what we're doing matters more than this is the idea of an internal truth. The names of note here are Charles Peirce, William James, and John Dewey. John Dewey is our main pragmatism man. Some of the things that you may hear in a faculty lounge: we have to get better. Change is inevitable. It is what it is. They need to experience it for themselves. But only by changing and devoting those types of things can we find out what the truth is, and the truth isn't stable. So in idealism which is that idea that we're going towards one truth, that is now changing because in pragmatism there is no more truth, and so change is inevitable means that the truth is going to change because what it means is what's doing the most good is that's what we're looking for. And so this started about 1850 1950. 1850 1950 is the kind of the piece for it. The oldest system relied too much on absolutes, and we're starting to feel like the world isn't flat anymore, and change is inevitable, and therefore what works is truth. And I think a lot of that is actually true today. We think of truth, death and taxes. Why are taxes there? Because that's what works at this current moment to keep our roads and our hospitals and our blah, 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 blah going. And it's influenced greatly by the Industrial Revolution. That idea that if we make things more efficient and we keep going and we keep pushing, we can get to a better place. It does dehumanize in a little way because what could be best for everyone could be clumping everyone together and socializing things and those types of things. So if reality is organized, we have no way of knowing it, and that's the big piece here. They're not saying that there isn't an absolute truth; they just have no way of knowing it. If we look at you know Aristotle, and Aristotle said that we find these patterns in nature that last forever and ever and ever, and we need to work these things there. What they're saying is that we'd have no way of ever finding out if that's the truth or not, if those patterns and those ways of doing things is right. So what Dewey's saying is like let's just go with what works, and that has to be the truth. So reality is never separated from the individual because what works for one person or one group of people may not work for another group of people. And you start to look at the difference in cultures around the world, and you'll see that sometimes that things work out better there than they do here. Just a silly example would be, Australia has a reverse cycle, basically academic calendar year because their summers are in the winter and their winters are in the summers. Those types of things. But reality has no absolutes. There's nothing in it that's there, and so we live in a universe with the lid off, meaning that there's no end of the rainbow because we have to always keep it going. And our reality is our experience and how we organize it and how we do those things. So there are two authorities of truth, which is the individual and the social group. And in pragmatism, the big one is the social group. What is best for the social group is the truth, and what we can all agree upon from our individual experience is the truth. So if we all agree that the sky is blue, then the truth, therefore, for the good of the social group is that the sky is blue, and that way we can always have a reference point and we can talk to each other in communication. One of the big things here is remember that words are important, and how we talk to each other is important, and the way that we go about things is really important because it means how it affects the absolute community and group of people, and that's something that we weren't talking about before. And beforehand it was about growing people closer to the truth, and here it's about developing the good for the social group. So truth and knowledge is what works, and what's good in the society is what works. And so we're concerned with how we gain knowledge, not what the knowledge is, because the more we learn about a process of things, the better we know something. Knowledge is rooted in experience. Therefore, we need to have experiences and teach people how to experience things and understand those things. We don't just receive knowledge, but we make it because we interact with it. Our process theology is everything is in a state of constant change. Therefore, God is changeable with relationship to man. And that's something that we can take a look over time and start to see changes in church doctrine and those types of things. But everything is in a state of constant change. Therefore, our relationship with God is in a constant change. So, therefore, we're going to talk about these Dewey's 5 steps to gain knowledge because it's not about what the knowledge is, it's about the process of getting there. It's concerned with the how we get there, not about the what it is. So, first we meet a problem, and then we have to really think about what problem we are in. So we diagnose the problem. What is the problem? Then we calculate the possible list of possible solutions. Then we calculate the possible outcomes and the consequences of each solution. Then we test the chosen solution and see if it's the consequence actually occurs. And the answer is if it works, then it is true. If it does not work, then it cannot be called truth. This is not my child, but this was a very cute example from the previous professor that, and I just thought was really good. So first, Carsey loves to stand up, but Daddy doesn't love it, and she's been told if she stands up, she'll receive a consequence. Carsey still wants to stand up, but she doesn't want a consequence. Again, she's diagnosed the problem. She wants to stand up, but she doesn't want a consequence. So we calculate the possible solution. Carsey thinks I can stand up, or I can stay seated, or I can do this little move. Step four is stand up, consequence or no consequence. Stay seated, no consequence, but no fun. Foot up, consequence or no consequence. Those are the possible outcomes with each one. Step five, she tests the chosen solution to see if the consequence actually occurred, and she stood up. And you can see from the picture on the right that there was a defined consequence that went along with it. So our pragmatism axiology is that humanity is responsible for its own values. And as a culture changes, so do we. And if you notice, what is beautiful in one culture is very different than another culture. We see that in our art. We see that in our architecture, and we see that in our values and morals as well. So that goes what works best for each group of people. And that which is ethical is what works, but must be tested on society. Not just a private belief, but something that works for the general good. So if we look at the list of the Ten Commandments, love your God, you shall have no idols, you shall not misuse the name. Remember the Sabbath and keeping it holy, honor your mother and father. So if you go to about there, and depending on whether you want to include it or not, the first four definitely are not a part of a pragmatic society. But you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not lie, you shall not covet. Those are all things we can generally agree upon are good and are better for society. If we agree that you should be able to steal, then we wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things that we do in our life because we'd just be worried about people stealing our stuff. According to a practice, which ones are most important? And that would be the 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So pragmatists in education discern by acting upon their current environments and using that process to discern what is truth. School is a part of life and not preparation for it. We're not teaching ourselves how to get to somewhere. We're actually exploring and being it because all of our experiences are part of our life. Our teacher guides the students to their own knowledge and their truth. The curriculum fits best for each student, and the methods depend on what the students respond to best. The process of learning is more important than the content. Students derive centered and we look at the constructivist education model right now that's being very popular. Where the students are exploring, they're making their own connections, and they're learning how to synthesize and analyze and communicate and doing all these things. And that's really where we're putting to with the pragmatic ideas. And then we move on to existentialism. We got Kierkegaard, we got Nietzsche, we got Sartre, we got Camus and Merleau-Ponty. But some of the things you're going to hear in existentialism is who am I? What is the meaning of life? You need to take control of your own life and what are the results of your choices. And that is because existentialism is all about finding your own personal truth. And it's not as much about the good of society, but finding out what is true for you. And it was 1800, 1950s, a big push right after World War II, because after World War II, everyone was thinking, one, if we have World War III, we're all dead anyways, but really, what's the purpose and why are we all here? Nietzsche and Kierkegaard was the other notable included the literatures and humanities, blah, 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 but existentialism as reaction to the assembly line phenomenon. Because the assembly line phenomenon dehumanized people, it really brought them down to cogs and wheels. And if somebody were to die on the assembly line, you just plug another person in and it keeps the thing running and it keeps the things efficient. But we don't particularly care about the cog, we care about the line. This is saying, well, what's the purpose of each cog? And individualism comes with choice, and only the individual has purpose. And and so that is what we have to really be focused on is what is everyone's purpose and how do we help them find their own purpose? Because it's not very helpful to know somebody else's purpose, but it's very helpful for you to know your own. And even if somebody's leading you towards that, that's important. That's an important thing for them to do so that way you find out where you need to be in life. So we place importance on axiology in a state of heightened feeling of ultimate realities discovered. This is somewhat similar to that idealism piece of really trying to find the absolute truth, but the absolute truth isn't something we're all striving to come to the same, but it's about finding out who and what you are. So existence precedes essence. We must spend our lives determining what we are. Who am I? The individuals are responsible for making their reality, and they do this through axiology, finding out what's important, what's good, what's bad. Man is what he makes himself to be. So we have to remember that if existence precedes essence, our whole job is to find that essence. And truth and knowledge are choices, and truth and knowledge are not built into the universe. There is no order that's predetermined in the universe. We are actually just understanding and trying to figure out what's our self, our truth, and our knowledge in ourselves. The individuals give meaning to truths. We choose to believe what we want to believe. Truth's authority is to the individual. The Bible is a bunch of personal encounters with God. And if we choose to believe that, it doesn't mean that we've had those personal encounters with God or that they've had a better thing with Him. But it's just stories of their personal encounters with God. Um, and that's the way you look at it. Now, we can potentially, go into nature and have a personal encounter with God, or whatever the way that you encounter God on your daily basis. But those are our personal ones, and the Bible is just their personal encounters with God. But really, it comes down to what you choose to believe in your own personal existence. Life should be spent finding the values of the individual. Individuals are responsible for their own ethics. There's no one to spell out what is good or bad. So that is up to you as an individual. We make our own choices, but are responsible for them. Conflict equals ethics. We must not shy away from conflict. And I think this is the key point with existentialism. It's not a selfish way of looking at the world. It is actually we decide what's good and bad, and we have to live with those choices. And that's okay. If we think that this person deserves to die, and then we get killed, or the society believes that we should be taken off and killed for killing a person, but we believe that that's the right way of doing it, that's fine because we are responsible for those choices. If you steal a piece of bread and in the culture they cut off your hand for stealing, but your family was fed and so you're okay with that, that again is you're making your own choice but are responsible for them. And therefore, when we face conflict is when we can really test those theories of whether or not we truly believe something and we truly think something's moral and right. And so when we start to look at these things, we really do come out of conflict and create a better versions of ourselves. Students are individuals and should be at the center of education. It should be student is a choosing nature, a free agent, a responsible agent. Again, they're choosing things, but they're free to choose whatever they want. But they're responsible for what they're getting and what they're missing. Again, a lot of this comes down to vocabulary and learning the way to thinking about the logic of the world as we apply it to ourselves. And so the teacher helps the student explore as many possible answers. Our methods should change with the needs of the students. Curriculum is whatever it takes to get the student better understanding of themselves. And the curriculum is subject to change and should have many options. And the curriculum should focus on life, death, and its meaning. All of those big metaphysical questions. Pragmatism goes down to those epistemological questions, where we're back up here with this metaphysical question. So, kind of just did a quick review. Again, this is just for yourself. Pause it real quick and just kind of look and say, what are the elements of pragmatism that you align with, and what's the elements of existentialism you align with? And so when we're looking at it, we can also take a look at this one right here if you want to pause real quick and take a look at kind of if you had to fill in the markers, the things. A would be that idealism and realism have a singular truth. B, the existential plus pragmatism means that the truth is determined by the individual. One, existentialism idealism deal with the interpersonal workings of yourself up, and that the truth is found within yourself and not without into the reality. And pragmatism, realism, while they do have inner pieces of things, also rely on external truths to come, and one of which is how it affects society, which is pragmatism. One of is the patterns of the world and nature, which is realism. That gets us through this one. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to post them into our Ask the Professor, and I look forward to checking up with you guys here in the next week or two. Bye.